Sexuality education in schools is a sensitive issue and can be avoided and dreaded by many teachers due to their own lack of effective learning when they were at school, which has created a negative stigma around the subject, and the contentious issue of whose authority decides what and how sexuality education is taught to students amid various differing opinions from parents, carers, schools, the curriculum, and the students themselves. What this means for students is that the learning opportunity they receive in this area are often conflicted with external politics, resulting in missed potential for deeper and more meaningful learning that could move society into not only accepting diversity but also celebrating it. The first major hurdle in overcoming this challenge is for teachers to engage in professional development that addresses their own lack of confidence in understanding sexuality education content knowledge and effective pedagogical approaches to deliver better learning for their students. Teachers also need to investigate their own insecurities and awkwardness around the topic, creating boundaries and acclimatizing their comfort levels to talking about these sensitive issues. While this is no easy task, it is somewhat in the power of the teacher to take control of their own learning and developmental needs for the good of their students. What's more challenging is negotiating the complexities of what is appropriate and important to be teaching students in the sexuality education area in schools. The discourse ranges from the biological and physical dimension of sex, with debates arguing for only the mechanics of sexual intercourse and conception being taught to the exclusion of contraception, while the other end of the argument calls for the inclusion of the social, emotional, and psychological dimensions of sex, incorporating the challenging of heteronormativity and embracing gender diversity. This aspect of sexuality education in schools is complicated because it is not clear who has ultimate authority over what and how sexuality education is approached, and therefore the teacher has less agency in making a difference. A University of Sydney survey of 117 parents found 97% of parents supported sex education in schools, believing puberty, correct names for genitals, and dealing with peer pressure to have sex should be a part of the curriculum. Safe sex and birth control were backed by 98%, while 97% thought communication about sex as a part of a loving relationship, and sexual decision-making should be included. More than 90% backed teaching about masturbation, and 83% wanted sexual pleasure and orgasm on the agenda. However, 32% rated abstinence very important in school sexual education classes, and a small but vocal minority of parents wanted abstinence-only education for their children. This small sample of parents found diversity in opinion around sex education, and the Same-Sex Marriage Postal Survey of 2017 also suggests that although law has changed, Australian adults are divided about same-sex marriage and therefore could be assumed divided on teaching about sexuality and gender diversity in schools. Victoria's Safe Schools program is committed to creating a safe and inclusive environment to tackle bullying, discrimination and harassment at schools, particularly arising from homophobia and transphobia. But does this negate a parent's right to what the child is taught? The following approach to sexuality education has been devised with the intention of appeasing all stakeholders by offering multiple perspectives around sexuality issues and encouraging students to come up with their own opinions after time to sit with and think critically about the information presented. With an interdisciplinary approach integrated into the entire curriculum, students are afforded the opportunity to learn about diverse perspectives regarding sexuality education through the scope of school subjects, creating more time in the schedule for this sensitive topic and suggesting that it should be considered as general learning and discussed openly and without fear. Practically, this might look like a history unit that investigates the history of homosexuality in ancient Greece and how religion and law have affected societal perspectives over the ages. This unit will be integrated with other relevant and diverse perspectives from other subjects to create a web of knowledge for students to generate a fuller understanding of sexuality. Using critical inquiry in this multi-perspective, interdisciplinary approach aims to foster students' personal interest to encourage engagement and motivate learning, and also allows students to engage in the content in a way and at a level that they feel most comfortable. Some potential pitfalls to be aware of in this approach. As the teacher delivering this cross-curriculum unit will have a personal philosophy that may indicate allegiance to a particular perspective, there is the potential to give more weight to that perspective or skim over the opposing perspective. This is dangerous territory, as the main objective of the overall unit is to be as unbiased as possible, and therefore the teacher must avoid letting their own personal opinions interfere. Another issue that may arise is still not appeasing every stakeholder, as some may wish for their perspective to be taught at the exclusion of all others. If this becomes an overwhelming issue, perhaps this approach is not right for your situation, as its biggest strength is the inclusion of multiple perspectives. Finally, and most ethically complex, is the potential that, towards the end of the unit, as students are critically engaging with the content and developing their own opinions, they align with the less inclusive perspective. If the hope is for the approach to widen understanding and conclude with the celebration of diversity, could it instead empower students to argue in opposition? And if inclusion is the aim of the unit, does that suggest that it was not unbiased in the perspective to begin with? Hopefully these considerations and the approach to sexuality education will prove useful for educators who are struggling with teaching this sensitive issue.